Ruth, welcome back. I want you to be known or reintroduced to people in the way that you want to be known here today. So, who are you?
I am the daughter of Maurice Thompson, was my most recent ancestor.
Who are you?
I am living and I am breathing and I am on time.
Who are you?
I am the descendants of Jean-Jacques Dessalines.
Who are you?
I am a mom, a partner, organizer.
Who are you?
I'm a practitioner. I'm a practitioner of restorative justice, of healing, of cultural organizing.
Who are you?
I am an abundance. I am abundance of my ancestors. I'm abundance of my spirit guides. I am the past. I am the present, and I am the future.
And finally, for now, who are you?
I am Ifakemi. I stand on the shoulders of my elders, and I stand also on the shoulders of young people who have taught me to bring joy and to bring laughter into the work that I do.
And nowhere in there did you say, I am an author, which is really, really why we're here today. But we're going to unpack so many of those other things. But really excited to share that Ruth has a book out. It's called Restorative Justice Practices, Circlekeeping for Community Healing. And I'm sure in the introduction you heard why some of those things are so important for her and why she is a really good messenger to carry this work right now. So before we jump into all that, to the extent that you want to answer the question on this moment in early June, afternoon for you, morning for me, how are you doing that your book is about to be out in the world in this way?
Yeah. Oh, David, thank you for having me again. I'm really, really grateful for us just reconnecting in this way. Yes, it's true. I am an author, y'all. I am grateful to be in this work in this way. The how I'm doing, generally, I feel excited. I feel excited, but I'm also like nervous at the same time because it's like another way, one of the values in circles that we hold is like vulnerability, so
Mm-hmm.
this is me being vulnerable to people who may or may not know me. They may or may not understand our ideology of like what restorative justice is. And so that vulnerability is met with a lot of excitement, especially for the times that we're in now. And so the book is launched, Restorative Justice Practices, Circlekeeping for Community Healing. It is launched. It launched in May for Haitian Heritage Month. And we're here, we're talking to different people. We're doing some book signings, beginning to do some book tours, and holding circles for folks to be able to be in practice with each other.
Yeah. And so we're going to talk a lot about the book today and a little bit about why it's important in this moment. But I think the thing that stands out to me initially is there are a lot of books about restorative justice out there. There are a lot of books about circle keeping out there. Why this book through you at this time?
Yeah. And so as it's so interesting because as like a practitioner, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
true. Like there's so many books out there. And this year marks 10 years since I've been training folks on circle keeping.
Mm-hmm.
And what that has meant for me is like a lot of people have asked like, oh, when they do a training, they're like, oh, do you have a manual? Do you have like a document? Do you have like a book or something? And so for me, it's almost like this is the tool that we can now share, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think what makes this book really special to me and for those who will read it is that it is a book that I started in 2022. I stopped and started again. I stopped and started again. And it's almost like, I really completely stopped up until the transition of my mom. My mom made her transition last year, March 2024. And it was very much unexpected. She passed away from a heart attack and also stroke. We don't know which came first, but in the times, and she was in Massachusetts, and in that time and in that period, it almost felt like, we never know how we'll be. Like, a matter of fact, I think I would want my mom to like be with me forever, you know, like in a
Mhm.
physical form. Like, I don't think, like, she transitioned at 70, you know, I don't think I would ever be ready, even if she transitioned at like 80 or 90 or 100, you know, like I think I would like the transition of a parent is almost something that you can never be ready for, you know. Um, but when she transitioned, I, you know, like went into a cycle of anger first, right? Of frustration, of confusion, of also then asking myself, well, what's the type of leader that I want to be now, right? Like as I'm in my process of grief. And in a couple months after that, it almost felt like her spirit came to me and was like, you have some uncompleted projects
Mhm.
that you have not been doing, and the book and other things, but the book was and is one of them. And so she really pushed me to her spirit really pushed me to write this book, her and finish it and complete it just in time for Haitian Heritage Month and just in time for Haitian Mother's Day.
Yeah. When you first heard that message from her, how did you feel?
Yeah, I think when I first heard it, I was like, is this real? Even as somebody who's like a practitioner and also like a African, like a practitioner of indigenous and African practices, right?
Mhm.
Like that, like ancestral work, understanding veneration of like our ancestors and our orishas and those who've come before us. But when I first heard it, I was like, I want to cry. I want to lay in the bed. I don't know what you're talking about. Like, I want to like I want to yell and scream. Like I want to just was just the times that I was in, you know? And I also felt like it almost felt like this makes sense too, you know, because of
Mhm.
the times that we're in right now of like really needing community, really needing to like lean on each other, and really needing to like for me to show up in a different way, you know, and to be vulnerable even in my grief and being open to connect and share with others of like what this period of grief has meant for me. Which I know grief is different from a lot of different people, right? But for me, it almost felt like awakening, a different
Mhm.
awakening of myself and identifying a different type of relationship with my mom.
Yeah. What had you stop in 2022?
Yeah, I think parenting. Like, not only am I like an
Oh my gosh.
organizer and I hold circles for different people and all the things, but I'm a mom, you know, like I have 3 children, I have a whole husband, like I have a whole family that I'm also raising. And 2022, well, I just had a baby, you know, I just had my youngest son, you know. And so it almost felt like while I was like writing and I stopped, it was like I had to prioritize what I wanted to birth, you know.
Mhm.
You know, and what I wanted to nurture at that time,
Mhm.
you know, and that pregnancy was not easy, you know, and even like him and him coming into Earthside was also not the easiest thing, you know, like we spent a lot of time in the hospital, many different surgeries,
Mhm.
spent a period of time in ICU, and I had to recover, you know, like my spirit and my body needed some time to recover, and I prioritize that. I prioritize my health and my
Yeah.
baby's health.
Yeah. I mean, and not only that, right? Here we are 2 years later and what it takes to be a mom specifically, because I know that's different as a dad, right? Like I do a lot and I know being a mom is different in the way that um one, the toll on your body.
Yeah,
Uh first of all, but also this is treading lightly into stereotypes, but like there's just a different level of care that
yeah,
moms think about than dads do, at least from my experience in the dynamic with my wife and I. But really, it's just so relatable
yeah,
about what like the last couple of years have been like for me. And when I think about you saying like I heard the call and was like, is this for me? Like, I've doubted like whether or not like this platform can continue to exist,
Mm,
just because of the way that it has not like financially sustained my family
mm,
in the ways that it's needed to. And so like links to engage and support in the description or wherever
yeah,
you're listening to this, right? Um,
absolutely.
but in my explorations into doing other work or working in other conditions, like the message that I've always gotten back is like, no, this isn't for you.
Mm,
You have a unique position
mm,
and message to carry. And so like when I hear you taking that message from your mom and be resistant to it
yeah.
initially, and it's like, oh no, this actually makes sense. This is what I need to do. And like, shit, this is gonna be hard, but I'm gonna do it. It's like
Anyways,
right there, right there. Um, and what takes you from lying on your bed to getting up, putting pen to paper, or I don't know, fingers to keyboard on blank Google Doc, and
mhm.
keep going.
Wow, that is true. That's you were asking really good questions, David, because I'm like, oh my god. Like, you would find me after my mom transitioned in March. Like, I of course had to do a lot of like her stuff, like kind
Mhm,
of going through her like paperwork, going through the house, going through like her personal items. And her spirit would just come to me. And then her spirit would come to me, and then other people would come to me and be like, hey Ruth, I heard you doing this thing. And I'm like, how did you know? It's like for people who are like wondering or who are like, this is not real, like ancestors are not real, like this is where I get challenged. I'm like, actually, like my most recent ancestors supported me through this, literally
mhm,
coming through people to tell me about myself, and particularly like my one of my godmother, um Ifawi, my one of my mentors, Joey, um and like and even like young people, right? Different people would come to me, but it was like in the middle of the night is when my mom's spirit would come. So like if I'm like kind of like sobbing or in my grief, what it has looked like is either it goes from like joy to sadness, through anger, like just like kind of feeling all of that out. But it wasn't until I came into acceptance of like this is what it is.
mhm,
And that took time, and it's still like I'm still kind of getting over that hump, of like acceptance. When I came into acceptance was when my spirit in my body came up and was like, would wake up in the middle of the night and like 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, like I'm writing. It was both. It was a little bit of both. It was like writing in journals, kind of picking back up of like what I had in like Google Docs, my training materials, the reflection questions that I was in trainings or workshops or with our youth programming at Fanm Saj. And then it began like like the waking up in the middle of the night was like the writing and the constructing, and then I think like the tail end of like finalizing and publishing it came also at a time of like, oh my goodness, like there's a lot going on in the world, and so me recognizing that like this book is coming out at a time where um folks are really needing and are grieving a lot, right? Like that I'm grieving my mom, but folks are grieving loss in a lot of different ways, and so um but that's really what kind of got me over that hump, of like
yeah,
waking up in the middle of the night, having folks kind of like check in on me and hold me accountable to like, I heard you doing this, I saw you doing this. And then to now publishing it and folks being like, well, how else can we get this out to our communities?
yeah, absolutely. And I think about making sure that like you're doing it from a place of acceptance instead
Yeah,
of resistance. Like comes like sorry, if you're doing it from a place of like resistance, that's going to come through in the writing,
yeah,
right? And doing it from a place of acceptance and energy and like answering the call from your community,
yeah,
um and ancestors, right? I don't think the book could have been any other way.
yeah,
And making sure that like now that this resource story manual of sorts I don't know that you would call it a manual, right? But like instructions for
Yeah.
how to be in community, a guide for how to be in community. Um, it's now here out in the world, and I know others have given you your flowers and applauded, but I just want to take a moment and say, like, you did it.
Yeah,
let's
thank
let's
you.
be let's be proud of that. Of course, more to come, but like when you sit and think about, hey mom, like I did it,
Yeah.
right? What does that feel like?
I get emotional, like I cry, I listen
Yeah.
to music, the music that she listens to. Like just this weekend we had, like for the last couple of weekends, we just had like a healing justice summit where we had folks like local, over 200 people came and participated in different circles and healing practices. And it brought me a lot of joy, but it also brought me a lot of like, wow, like we've done this, like we're doing this. And I had like a book talk during that event and that gathering, and folks are like so ready for it, that it makes me like just feel like I'm like oof, the fact that I feel proud, like I get emotional, but I feel proud ultimately of myself because I'm making my mom proud, and like I've said yes to her first her first
Mhm.
request on the other side, I've said yes to that, and that makes me feel like um that I'm still in relationship with her, that I'm able to still stay connected with her, even her on the other side, So, um, but I'm deeply grateful that I have community, like I'm deeply grateful that I have community and that I'm able to be a practitioner, but like I'm also at this stance of humility, like that there's so much more to learn and to gather, and that I don't have to do it by myself, you know. Um, so yeah.
Thank you for going there and sharing that. I'm recognizing as I'm asking you these questions, I'm really like projecting like my inability to like sit
Mm,
in emotions. It's like this
mm,
is a good practice, and like I know it's not the same like doing it with you, but like I'm recognizing like my need as someone who is really achievement oriented and
mm.
driven to be like, great, on to the next.
Yeah.
We did it. But now we have this training. Let's keep it pushing, keep it pushing, let's keep it moving. But like
Yeah.
I have a hard time more in my personal life than professionally doing this work, or in like, because like when I'm locked into this work, it's like, okay, yeah, we're gonna sit here, we're gonna create this space and process. But like in my life as David navigating the universe, like feelings, what feelings?
Mm,
Right? Like
mhm.
there are diapers to change, meals to cook,
Right.
um social copy to be written, right? Emails
Right.
to write, like deliverables for a PD or whatever it is to do. Why sit in feelings, and like that acknowledgement of those things, both for pride and celebration as well as grief,
Mm,
are really, really important. And as I'm saying, this is just a message to myself, but thank you for going on this journey
yeah.
alongside.
Yeah, it's true. It makes me wonder, like, as like practitioners, it's almost like we have so much that we hold.
Mhm.
We hold other people's stories, we hold other people's like stuff. But like as practitioners, it's like we hold our emotions too.
Mhm.
Like, and how do we like hold the boundaries, but then also feel, like how do we allow ourselves to also feel? And grief definitely does that. Grief, there's no, it's almost like I've told myself that I'm not hiding and running from my grief
Mhm.
because this is my mom.
Mhm.
Like I'm like, oh yeah, like I'm definitely going to be honoring her, but like when those feelings come, like, and as a spiritualist, like I know that like I embody like or Orishas or my ancestors, they try their best to like help me to embody this like wisdom of understanding what transitions actually mean.
Mhm.
But when those emotions come, like they come in tears. Sometimes they come in anger. And when they come in anger, folks be like, whoa, like you're supposed to be on this pedestal and this. And I'm like, nah, like I'm a human being. I hurt too. And I too have like emotions, and grief is something that is a navigating, it like doesn't go away, but it's like,
Yeah.
how do I navigate it today or hold it or release it?
And then how are you being held by community
Yeah.
when those things happen, right?
Yeah.
Because I think one of the things that, you as a parent of young kids grieve is like the loss of community in the way that our ancestors had it,
Yeah.
right? And just in the way that we're thinking about navigating community today, where my kid is sick and can't go to daycare, it's a call to my mom to come over
Mm.
and help out. So one, I can do this. My
Yeah.
wife can go do work, but like, how fortunate are we to be able to have my mom a phone call away to step in? Where
Right.
like not everybody has that. That would have been, it would have been sacrificing either my work or my wife's work. And, in other circumstances, we would happily do that. But like, we don't have all of those support systems. And, we didn't come here to talk about the need for like extended family leave, extended
Right.
parental leave. But when we think about like how we are held in community as practitioners, as like not people on a pedestal, but as people who have purpose and um, are seen as, I'll say, healers.
Yeah.
You can use other words to describe what we do. Healers, teachers, guides. Like
Yeah.
we are still people with needs,
Yeah. That's right.
right? And when you're talking about an expression of anger coming in the moment out of context for like whoever's receiving that, like that might be jarring.
Yeah.
And because they do not know the context, because you're not in community in that way specifically, right? It's
Yeah.
like, well, I thought you were supposed to be this super restorative
Mm.
spiritual person, right? And that's damaging for everybody,
Yeah.
right? When we are not taken care of, when we are not both taking care of ourselves and like being supported by the environments we're a part of.
That's shame. That's real.
When I think about making sure that you are supported in the ways, or practitioners in general are supported in the ways that feel good, what does support look like for people engaging with this book? What do you want them to know? What is some of the context
Mm.
that you want them to know about um, what you're presenting, right? Because this isn't a read it, okay, I know everything about restorative
Right.
justice and circle keeping. How do you want people to engage? How are you inviting people to engage?
Ashe. So I'm pulling out the book so that way folks
Hmm.
can like really understand, right? That for me, like the journey of this book, right, was first birthed from grief, right? So this book was birthed from grief, and not just any grief, but like my apparent grief, right? And so for me, the why now is like very much grounded in my the why now is like my mom asked me to do this, right?
Hmm.
Asked me to finish something. And I want people to like read it and understand that the book itself is a circle, right? I want people to understand and have a relationship of what is their organizing, right? Like what does their community organizing look like in relationship with either restorative justice as a strategy, healing justice as a strategy, transformative justice as a strategy to complement the call to action for their like community, right? So the book itself is grounded in my own organizing, my own understanding of like how I enter this work, right? So I tell folks like I share like my how I got into this work through the Power Youth Center for Social Change, through understanding like organizing young people, creating space for young people to like show up in the world, right? But then learning from them gave me an opportunity to like also it gave me an opportunity to also sit with why would somebody read this? And if they want to be a circle keeper, whether or not they want to be a circle keeper or not, and let's say they're just like a community organizer that hasn't heard about restorative justice, that I would want them to say, okay, here's a journey of as a practitioner. Like I would want them to say, okay, here's like an example of like how you can enter, whether you're an organizer, a lawyer, a nurse, a doctor, like a community servant, whatever role that you have, here's a journey. And I would want them to like kind of picture themselves in that, right? Kind of like be like, like whatever role that I hold, how can I hold circles, right? How can I
Hmm.
be in alignment? And then taking folks through like understanding the grounding of like spirituality and elements. What are the elements of circles? Like, how do we kind of understand circle of like this continuum of like whether you're in a physical circle or outside of the circle, like how are we also holding those guidelines and those values and those elements outside of the circle to connect back to ourselves and connect back to nature, right? And then treat each other with like dignity and respect. And then I closed the book out with some case studies on like how I use circles in different ways. And so it's an invitation. The book itself is an invitation. It's in different languages. So I have like Haitian, especially like Haitian Creole and Yoruba in there, as a way to like affirm that my lineage, right, comes from like Haitian and West African lineage of like this as a tool, not just as an indigenous practice, but an African practice too.
Yeah, and I think well, just a couple clarifications. When you said elements, are you talking like talking piece, centerpiece, beginning, or like earth, air, water, fire? Yeah.
Elements of earth, fire, wind, water.
Okay.
If when I do the editing again of this book, because
Yeah.
you know I'm an artist too.
Yeah.
I'm an artist, so I'm like, oh, I could say this differently. I could say that. So when that comes, I'm gonna add the element of iron. You
Mm.
know, but elements in that way is in the book. Guidelines are also in the book too, like the guidelines, like the speak from the heart, listen from the heart, speak with respect, listen with respect, confidentiality, remain in the circle, and respecting the talking piece. So our guidelines are like also in the book with reflection questions.
Gotcha. Gotcha.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I'm curious, speaking to the case studies, I think a lot of people think about incidents of conflict and harm, which definitely come up in organizing spaces and
Yeah,
community spaces, really wherever people are in relationships. People also think about circles for check-ins and community building. What are the kind of case studies that you're sharing in the book? And,
yeah,
I guess you shared them in the book, so like appropriate confidentiality has already been taken, right?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So like the ones, and I have four of them. So there's
Yeah.
like case studies for how we use circles for harm reduction, right? For like
Hmm.
transformative justice. How circles are used for like transformative justice or community accountability processes. Um, I also have circle keeping for community building, like how, like a case study on specifically of like when there's like a time to do community building, like this is how I've held circle, you know? And then I also have a case study on healing justice, right? Healing justice as it relates to like lineage, right? And understanding like what does it mean to like reclaim our culture, reclaim our language. And that specifically is like related to like my experience in holding circles in Nigeria,
Hmm.
as like a reclamation, that literally as like a reclamation, but also work that I had to do and was honored to do to support the transition of my mom, right? Like after her transition and doing ceremony. And then also circle keeping as a process and tool for restorative human resources and restorative HR, and utilizing it again as like a process within
Hmm.
nonprofits or for profits or organizations to like sustain themselves.
Yeah. I mean, I think there are lots of different purposes
Yeah,
that we can use this framework of circles, peacemaking circles, talking circles,
yeah,
whatever language your lineage and your teacher, you listener, have become familiar with these ways. But I really think it's important to show those concrete examples about how, one, how flexible the form is,
yeah,
and two, like it is a form, there is a framework, there is like intentional practice set up
yeah.
behind all of them, and it should be carried with care and not
Sure.
just hey, let's circle up, here's a talking piece, let's go.
Yeah,
There are positive things that can come from that, no doubt, but how do you do that with intention from a grounded space? It is really important.
a shame, a shame.
What is something that you haven't talked about on your book tour that exists in the book that you've wanted to highlight?
I haven't yet found time, which I know I'm sure this is gonna happen, but I haven't found time yet to talk about the grounding of like what's in the book is like like I'm an Ifa practitioner, right? Like I
Mhm.
am, like that is my specific lineage, right? Healing and practitioner. And Ifa is an African spiritual practice of like understanding like the past, present, and future. Um, and what is in the book is like understanding how like this practice of Ifa, which is like a very much indigenous African practice of like understanding our relationship with ourselves, understanding our relationship with our ancestors and those that are coming after us, right? How does circle keeping fit into
Mm.
Ifa, right? I was in the tradition. I was in the tradition doing circle keeping, but even me and myself, like an understanding like peacekeeping, it's almost like I had to like understand myself a little bit more to understand like what does it mean to be a practitioner of
Mhm.
peace? What does it mean to be a practitioner of justice? What does it mean to be a practitioner of like of healing, right?
Mhm.
And there's a orisha called Obatala. Obatala is orisha that is the oldest orisha. Orishas are like deities or divine beings that are on that have been on earth and that they've transcended to like to become what we call orishas, right?
Mhm.
And Obatala is the oldest, most wise orisha, and this particular orisha is the deity that governs me, and understanding that whether or not somebody may be listening to this and they're like, oh, I don't know what you're talking about. I don't know who Abata is. I don't know what Ifa is. But for me, as like a writer and as a practitioner, I had to understand myself a little bit more to understand like what is my practice, right?
Mhm.
And so Obatala being the peacekeeper, the most wise, the one that like other orishas go to when something is happening in their lives or in the society. It's only right that I like speak on like the governance of what it means to like carry and be at peace with nature. What does it mean to be at peace with consciousness? What does it mean to be at peace with all of these injustices that we're seeing, and how do we either make restoration and repair, right? And then or transform what cannot be repaired, you know?
Mhm.
And Obatala is like the deity that governs all of that. In fact, Obatala is the one that governs all human beings' consciousness and minds, whether people know it or not, right? So for me, it's like an invitation to also talk about Ifa, to talk about the spiritual practice and how I'm using it, how I'm using Ifa um, and circle keeping and the energies of like past, present, and future all at the same time for social justice, for social change, for like restorative justice, right? Or for transformative justice.
Mhm.
And I hope that when people read this, that it again becomes like a practice, you know, like they are able to be in practice if they don't already have a practice.
Yeah. I'm curious how you think about people who most of your readers, I imagine, aren't coming from the perspective of Ifa.
Yeah,
Like I'm coming from the perspective of like no longer Christian.
yeah,
And I do not have specific frameworks about how I engage in the world in the spiritual realm.
yeah,
I believe in like the deep interconnection between all beings,
yeah.
right? But I don't have like specific frameworks for that. Um, I was taught peacekeeping circles through an indigenous, Native American, Canadian
Mm,
perspective, right? Tagish people, from Lakota people, in some ways from like Nahuatl in Mexican traditions. And so when I think about grounding people in that level of practice and then asking them to go do this for HR, right? Or asking them even to do this in the classroom, or
yeah,
asking them to do this like, hey, we're organizing to get a community center in our space. Like,
yeah,
what is the place for spirituality when the practitioner does not necessarily have that developed practice for themselves?
yeah. A shame. Yeah, and it's everything is like an invitation, right? Like
Mhm.
everything, even like entering circle, we ask for consent, right? We hold a lot of kind of like one-on-one conversations, but we ask folks consent throughout a circle process, right?
Mhm.
One of the things that we one of the things that we have to ground ourselves in is that each person that we encounter is a spiritual being, right? And they are in human form. And so from that, when we come into circle, that itself is the spiritual practice, right? Like that in itself is the practice of how do I understand what has happened, right? Wherever people are, whether they're in a school, a nonprofit, whichever, how do we enter as a practitioner to listen to that, to what has happened, and also understanding the person's need, right? And not just like what we need for like accountability, right? But I talk about this in the book too, of like not only around like accountability, but like ultimately what is it that your spirit needs, right? And answering that question of like, what ultimately is your purpose? What are you here to do? Especially when you've been hurt, you've been harmed, there's been conflict. It's almost like you can get as many accountability things. You could be like, all right, I want this person to do this. I want this community to do that. I want this to happen. I want that to happen. I want the community to hold it in this way. Like, so what happens if none of those things happen? What happens if the people who you want accountability from are not ready? Like what happens, right? So then that's when we tap into like this practice of circles, this practice of like spirit is like that ultimately we still have a relationship to spirit to be, and we have accountability to ourselves, right? Like we ultimately still have accountability to like heal ourselves, heal our ancestors, heal those who've come before us. And it's when we're in circle that we're able to like really understand that. You know why? Because we have the talking piece and we're able to like answer that question. Even if the only question that we ask is like, what do you need? You go a couple of rounds and you share and you share. Outside of that, and we get into not just from our minds, but to our heart, then we're able to really like be in like acceptance of like, what does that mean for us? You know, like what does that need? What fuels our spirit? What fuels our body? What fuels it? Right. And then it reminds us of like, oh yeah, like I have a spirit. I have needs like outside of like these systems, like this is what my spirit needs, right? This is what I'm here to do or whatever it is, you know? But that the pieces that we get to process in circle, you know, like processing that helps us to be accountable to our healing. And hopefully we could be transformed by it, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and like it's an invitation for like not everyone will go there, and I'm
Yeah.
thinking about like even but the practice, the responsibility of the keeper in that space is to create the environment where that invitation is welcomed,
Yeah.
right? Like where people feel safe enough, not like safe, but like safe enough
Yeah.
to go there and engage to whatever level they're willing to go to when it
Yeah.
comes to like a simple question, a very deep and penetrating question, if they're willing to go there, about like, what do you need?
Yeah.
Right. Because I think about moments with young people, but I think young people are really just people just walking around in younger bodies. Like we as adults like have layers of understanding about the world, but like
Mhm.
still like often engage in the world with that childlike mentality. And if you ask a kid like in the moment of harm, like they have not regulated enough, they have not felt safe enough, comfortable enough with you,
Yeah.
safe enough or comfortable with their peers to share like what is actually going on. They might not have the emotional vocabulary yet, right?
Yeah.
They might not have the depth of understanding. The same thing is true for like many adults.
Yeah.
um,
Exactly.
right? But like our job as practitioners, as keepers of circle, creators of this, I like to say vulnerageous space, vulnerable, courageous, is to allow people to go there and support them in developing some of that language.
Yeah. Ashe. Ashe. Yeah.
You talked about this book being a response to grief. But I know as part of our conversation before we hit record, you were also talking about, you know, grief for individuals who might be experiencing the loss of a parent, grief for individuals who are experiencing loss in lots of different ways. But what else makes this book a response to the moment that we're sitting here in the spring, almost summer of 2025.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, it's the grief of understanding that there's a whole genocide happening right now,
Mhm.
right? Like there's a whole, and there are families that are mourning every single day, right? There is this collective grief of like in the United States that folks understand the way that we do movement is through these nonprofits, right? Through like
Mhm.
social justice movement building is through nonprofits, at least in this part of the world, right? In these United States of America, right? And like what we're seeing is like there's like this like decimation of like funding and resources, and folks are like scrambling of like, well, how we're building, what are we doing, right? Um, and then also individually, like folks are like having real complex relationships um with each other, and like that, whether it's like different political ideology, of understanding what is, and this it's not, it's more than political lines, right? um and so I think that this book is birthed at a time where we need to understand who our communities are, right? We need to know who we are. We need to understand like that actually building our communities regardless of like what systems exist, like we can do that. We have the spirit self, we have the human self. We can take that level of action to say, let me talk to my neighbor. Let me, like, it doesn't, I live in Florida, it
Mhm.
doesn't have to be a crisis, it doesn't have to be a hurricane for me to connect with my neighbor, right? It doesn't have to be like the whatever political line people are on, like to talk to or to connect with a community organization, right? Um, June 2nd, the day that this is being recorded in early spring, late summer, right?
Mhm.
There's also like hundreds and thousands of immigrants that are being deported, right? There's also like all of these policies that our folks are like needing to like navigate of like, how do I actually take care of my family right now? What are the
Mhm.
resources that I need? Like, people are like, I don't know what you're talking about. I don't know what healing looks like. I need community. I need this resource. I need legal support. I need, I need food. I need diapers. I need to protect myself. I need whatever it is that they need, right? Tangible needs. So why not have my invitation for this book is like create space to build community, right? Create space to name, to understand, okay, this is what's happening in my community. These are the things that we need, and how can we be responsive to the needs of our communities? And of course, like harm and conflict is like part of that, right? But if we could do that in a place that's like very much like grounded in like care, of mutual aid, of empathy, of understanding, like compassion, like of like we're gonna see each other as like human beings, as spiritual beings, then the way that we respond will not just be about political alignment, but it'll be
Mhm.
about like, oh yeah, like this is how I treat my neighbor or treat my community with like human dignity, right? Um, and I think that's for me, like that's why circles are like so important, is that it helps us to rehumanize ourselves, right? Like people could come into circle, they don't have to give you their title, their position, their role. They could come in as a young person, an elder. Every person who comes into circle has wisdom to share, right? And so, what are the opportunities where we can create space for people to share their wisdom with each other?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, as much as the request or the need for like material resources exist, you can get those through capitalism, some
Yeah.
of them, and most of us hearing our voices right now
Yeah.
like don't have the capital to meet all of those needs.
Mm-hmm.
So what do we have left?
Yeah.
Right? We have community, and maybe we don't have community right now that can be responsive to those needs. So how do we go about creating it?
Yeah.
um Intentionally inviting folks into those spaces, and that is scary,
Yeah.
right? Putting yourself out there. um and I'll speak for myself. Like, I know my neighbors to my left and right, but
Yeah.
not like necessarily. Oh, left and right. two houses,
Yeah.
right? But not necessarily across the street in the same way, not around the block. And so what does it mean to be able to create those opportunities to connect? What does that look like for you?
Yeah. So I think for me right now, it looks like talking to as many people as possible with about this book. Matter of fact, I saw one of my neighbors across the street. He had a Trust Black Women shirt, and I didn't even know that he was trusting Black women in that way, right? Because that's a campaign, right? Like Trust Black
Yeah, yeah.
Women is a campaign. Um, and so I think for me, what it currently looks like is like tapping into understanding like what my current needs are, where it's like to build community, to go through, to continue to go through and navigate like my grief, right? To develop like pods of like, okay, um, who all can support with whatever areas of my family needs and the organization that I run Fanm Saj's needs, and also connecting with my neighbors, right? Like having these kind of conversations in circles, not just in other communities that I serve, but like inviting my own neighbors to be part of these conversations too. So that way they can know what I do and I know what they do, and that we're able to like really connect in deeper ways, you know? I will say that one of the things that I comes up for me when you ask this question is this thing around like contradictions. You know, there's also like the contradictions that exist of like living in like a materialistic capitalistic like world. It's like, and like putting this book out, it's like, how do I do that in a way that's also principled in alignment with my values?
Mhm.
And so like vulnerability is one of those contradictions of like, how do I also practice these values even when I'm in conflict, right? Or even when I'm the one that causes harm, right? Like, how do I actually also step into that and not hold myself, or at least kind of like be in this like conversation with folks to understand like just because I'm a circle keeper, a practitioner, and I've written this book doesn't mean that I fall out. Like I'm like I fall in and out, right? Of like what does it mean to be a practitioner? And that's the whole thing, is that like we're not perfect, right? We're trying to figure out our emotions. We're developing and redeveloping our wisdom constantly, you know? And in some ways, this this book is holding me to it because I get to like be in reflection with community members around this book.
Yeah. I want to go back to part of what you talked about when you're talking about inviting your neighbors to these conversations. What did that look like at the beginning?
So currently, what that looks like is doing like I want to do circles with my
Hmm.
neighbors, right? Like that, like doing circles. But for now, or what it's currently look like is like getting to know them, you know, like my children hanging out with their children,
Hmm.
us doing like some of my neighbors do like movie nights. If I'm doing something here, then we'll invite them here. My neighbors, I live in Florida. My neighbors are not all in the same kind of like class, gender, political ideology as me,
Hmm.
right? Like that,
Hmm.
like I live in Florida, and what in the part of Florida that like I live is every people are it's very everybody's different.
Hmm.
But what I see that's happening is that when there's a need, everybody comes through. Like we're in like we just entered hurricane season, for example. You
Hmm.
need your shutters put up, everybody's there. Like folks are like sharing resources. Folks are like, all right, this is what I have, this is what I don't have, and this is what I need. Like those are the moments of like crisis, you know? And so as being here and building this like community here, it's almost like I get an opportunity to like hold circle before, right? Or
Hmm.
like when there's no crisis, you know? And so, but it just looks like getting to know people, you know, on like a
Yeah, gotcha.
individual basis.
No, I mean, I was just curious. Like, one of the things that I talked to my wife about is like, we bought a little jumper water slide thing for like little kids,
Yeah.
because like our kids' birthdays are like kind of close together. So like, are we really gonna rent this thing, within twice within the same month? And we're like, no, let's just buy it. And like,
Mhm.
what would it look like to like run around to the neighbor kids and be like, hey, just come over.
Yeah.
And I think like one of the things that I run into with that, and like I've already seen it, is like the distrust that parents have of other people,
Yeah.
just because of like the way that we've been socialized. Like it's different from when you and I grew up and
Yeah.
like go play,
Yeah.
right? Our parents would just like kick us out the door and be like, okay, see you later,
Yeah.
right? Um, and part of that is just showing up over and over and building trust in that way. But like I'm thinking about for myself, like how difficult, like even that level of engagement is in the socio-political, cultural times that we exist in.
Yeah, yeah, it's true. But I do think, yeah, you're right. Like it's almost like the trust building. It's like organizing 101, right? Like it's
Yeah,
the
yeah.
relationship building, the trust building. Like, because I'm thinking of like we did like a mini, like when it's like Kwanzaa season or like the end of the year, like winter holiday season, we try to do things for like our family, and then we invite like our neighbors too. And I remember one of the days we invited some of the neighbors of our like the children to come, and they were like ready to be part of it. We did like the day was Kuju Chakalia, which is self-determination. That's the
Hmm.
principle of Kwanzaa. And we had like my children and some of the neighbors' children to come. But I was like, and we did song, and we talked about the principles of Kwanzaa, and we talked about the red, black, and green flag and like what it means, But like I'm thinking of like that would not have been possible to do if like our children, like we didn't know each other,
Yeah.
like that would not have been possible to do.
Are these other Black children?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Oh, okay, okay.
Yeah,
I mean, like it's levels. There's levels
yeah,
to
there's
this. Like, like
levels.
even within like even in Black community, like think about like I don't live in a Black community. Like almost everybody around me is Mexican, right?
Mhm.
And so like, what are the levels of like you're doing what? Like you're lighting candles? Like to who? This isn't this isn't the church, right?
That's so true. That's so true because, like, for example, that felt like easeful because like I think we had the relationship with the parents.
Mhm,
People know me, they know what I do. Um, which is like connected to, for example, my one of my other neighbors. She's an herbalist.
mhm,
And she has a whole garden. So my youngest, my 3-year-old, he like, and we don't have like kind of closed gates, so we could like
mhm.
share our yard. And so he'll walk into her yard, and she has a whole sanctuary like in there, right? So she has like a small pond and like herbs and trees and all the things. And he'll walk in there, and I'm like, wow, like this is such a beautiful like experience. um but now he's in school, like he's in like a daycare, so he doesn't have as much time to like kind of wander you
Mhm.
know but even just having that relationship with neighbors of like, if my child wanders and goes there, like they're okay with it, like
Yeah.
they're like, oh, like, and that too is like, again, we're not in circle, but it's like us having like that principle of like, oh, like there's this thing in nature that my child is like connecting to, and my neighbor is okay with that. I think generally she's pretty cool regardless.
Yeah.
But I think again, it takes that level of like relationship of like, these people are not going to come and like, I don't know, tear my trees down or like hurt my plants or hurt the fish in the small pond, but that they're here to like connect, or like, and that's a level of respect that I hold, or that we hold outside of circle.
Hmm.
So if and
Yeah.
when I invite them to join a circle, they already know a little bit of who I am. They already know like the values that I hold, or I try my best to hold.
How do you explain to people what you do?
You know who I had
Eh,
to That's a good question. Like, who I had to
because like and
I want to
let
know
me
how you're gonna do
contextualize my
it.
question, right? Because like I tell people that when most of the time when people ask, I'm really not trying to have a conversation.
Yeah.
So part of it is like, oh, like school and organizational leadership around issues of like conflict and relationship building, and
Hmm.
like people will usually drop it
Yeah.
after that, right? Because like, how do you explain what it is we do? Like a version of what do I do is like, I'm a podcaster, right? Like, but I think there's this fear, like, one, so there's definitely a level of like, I'm really not trying to have like this full conversation right now, but there's also this fear of like, oh, am I really gonna like step into an argument about abolition right now,
Mm,
or like colonization or imperialism, right? Like, I I did not come here to do that. I came here to just say like, what's up? Hey, it's cool that our kids are at soccer practice,
right,
right?
right.
Um, and like, how much is that preventing me from actually connecting with people in like for who I am and like the way that I show up in the world? And so when you say that like your neighbor like knows what you do, like how did you actually tell them
Yeah.
like what you do from like Ruth, not from like, oh, I'm the executive director of XYZ. Yeah.
Yeah, I think this is a really good question because so for example, although my principle, right? Like I believe that the world exists before there I live in the South, right? So
Mhm.
before there was any type of policing, we existed as one, right? Like we were
Mhm.
able to like be in the world.
I know there's a lot of fear for myself in like actually sharing who I am and what I do beyond like, oh, I run this company, I host this podcast, I do professional development, I facilitate conflict. It's about the way that David moves through the world. And when I see my neighbors with their Blue Lives Matter flags, like there's fear on my end of like, am I really going to have a conversation about abolition when I'm talking about building and strengthening relationships rooted in equity and trust so we can repair harm without having to deal with all of that? How do you think about introducing yourself in ways that are expansive of who you are, not just like, oh, I'm the executive director of such and such organization and I'm an author and like all these things?
Yeah, that's so true. Like it's so interesting because like for me as like a spiritual being, right, as a practitioner, I I always, well, in my organizing and understanding, like my political theory and understanding, like through political education, all of that, and how I've arrived is like, what does the world look like, right, without policing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, and I live in the South, and I've had to like answer that question and have had to been like curious of like, what does it look like in a world where we're not, um, penalizing and putting people out, throwing people away, or somebody made a mistake and we're like, okay, we need to police them. We need to do this. We need to do that. We need to do this. Right. Um, and for me, I've had to imagine with others and with my community to like sit with like, what does a world, um, without police look like, you know? And in Florida, in the South, policing was not, didn't exist for like, it's just, it's newer, right? Like policing
Mm-hmm.
exists as slave catching, right? Like as a tool to like catch slaves in the South. And so coming from that perspective, when I meet people, that's not the first thing that I say.
Yeah.
That's not the first thing. Can you imagine? Like, and I live in, in Florida. I live in the South, and so the political ideology. Even if somebody's on the red, they're on the blue, they're on the red. Like they kind of flip flop based off of like who's in power and who's in perceived power and who's running for office and whatever. Um, but in a lot of ways, um, I show up, I introduce myself first just by the who I am, right? Like what I carry. So I come in, I'm already a dark skinned Black woman, right? But I rock my natural hair. Sometimes I rock like head wraps. And so I oftentimes people will already have an idea or they already have or place judgment on me even before I open my mouth, right?
Sure.
But when I open my mouth, I remind people or I introduce myself first as a mom, right? Like as somebody who like genuinely cares about the well-being of children because I
Mm-hmm.
myself have children, right? As somebody who cares about our environment as nature, right? As somebody who's like kind of like, well, what can we do to make this world a better place? Because how it currently is like if we have these children and we're raising them and we want them to live in safe and healthy communities, like that's what I do. So the type of work, so then I'll tell people like, well, the type of work that I do is like conflict resolution or peacekeeping or trying to get people to like build relationships and build community,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I know my principle, like I know that at the end of the day, my imagination that I want to be in with people is like, how can we be in self-determination? And what does a world look like where we are free from violence, free from harm, free from conflict, and that we're able to, in a lot of ways, govern ourselves, right? Like, what does
Mm.
that look like? Right. And giving folks an opportunity to like hopefully be in relationship with me on that.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think, like, taking it down to the things that are maybe most accessible, but also, like, easy to find common ground on,
Yeah,
is helpful because, like, the explicit manifestation of what does it look like to live in a world where we are safe, where our children are safe,
exactly.
looks very different to different people
Exactly.
depending on, um, how you were socialized and what you believe about the world. But connecting on, like, well-being of children is a really helpful framing that I might, like, slip into
Yeah.
slip into my introduction
Yeah.
bag.
Because you have
um
children, like,
I do, right? And, like, I do, and I think there's a way that can be
yeah.
disingenuous, right? It was like, I have kids, of course I want, because, like, not that people, I guess, like, because people can use the same energy, and, like, I wouldn't even call it disingenuous, but, like, that's not always the uniting thing that, like, you might think it is, because
Yeah.
people can use the same energy to be like, and that's why we need to ban all these books in
Yeah.
schools,
Right,
right?
right.
um but to humanize yourself as somebody who does care about children and figuring out, like, what ways um care exists,
Yeah.
safety exists in the second conversation, or, like, a few layers deeper in the conversation and getting to know somebody can be helpful.
Yeah. That's shame.
Well, we've gone through a rollicking conversation talking about your book, talking about where we are in the world. Of course, of course, your book will be linked in the description or summary of wherever you're watching or
Yeah.
listening to this conversation. But what else do you want to leave the people with?
Yeah. I wanna leave people with something from the book. Um
Mhm.
and for people to kind of like look forward to. So I want to leave some reflection questions that are in the book. And these reflection questions are coming from chapter 14, which is this is where we go into case studies. This particular case study is around healing justice circles in Nigeria. Um, and the reflection questions that I have for folks listening is what is your own healing lineage? Like what is, like, as you enter circles, as you enter this book, what is your own lineage? Right? Like I would like for folks to like sit with like what brings them to this book, right? Like what's
Mhm.
their lineage, like what their ancestry is, or how did they first learn or hear about restorative justice practices, even if the first time that they heard about it is through listening to the podcast. Um, and so some questions that I would ask folks to imagine is like, um, what healing activities do you know now? And how could you use them in community circles? how can you make how can you make a space that respects different languages and cultures in your gatherings? um, and where would you like to hold healing circles, and what do you want to achieve from them, right? And so healing justice is a strategy. Circle keeping is part of that strategy of like enacting like healing and justice in our communities, right? Um, and somebody, it's true. Like once you read this book, you're not. Once you read a book, you get information, but it doesn't make you automatically a circle keeper, right? But it's an invitation to then be to get trained, right? Like to become part of a community, or to build a community. The thing is, we're in circles all the time. Like we're holding circles all the time, but to really receive training or to workshop it or to figure out like elements and principles of like to hold the integrity of it is like the invitation that I would ask folks to be in is to if you don't have a practice of healing, of practicing conflict resolution, of harm reduction, have circle keeping be that tool, right? And have circle keeping be that practice for you, And if you're looking to build a community, start with your family, start with your neighbors, and connect with the organization that's also trying to bring about not just like change in alternative building, right, with circle keeping, but like change in systems too.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, Ruth, thank you so much. There are lots of ways that people can connect with your work through Faja, through Fanm Saj, and directly through your website for trainings and all of
Yeah.
that. All that information is, again, in the description or summary of wherever you're watching and or listening to this. Until next
Yeah.
time, take care. And for those listening, go build the world that we want to live in.
Ashe. Thank you.